No ladder reaches heaven. On God, apes, kings, office politics, and the mercy of remembering that no hierarchy is final. By Elias Winter, May 5, 2026. Read by an automated voice. Before there were kings, there were bodies. Before there were laws, there were teeth, shoulders, noise, fear, display. The first hierarchy arrived without a crown. It arrived as posture. One animal took more space. Another yielded. One male threatened. Another looked away. A troop learned who could strike, who had allies, who got food first, who had to wait. The chimpanzee needs no management theory. He needs no constitution, no HR department, no executive coach, no quarterly OKRs, no LinkedIn post about servant leadership. He understands rank through force, alliance, grooming, intimidation, reconciliation, memory, and timing. I find this both horrifying and reassuring. Horrifying because one realizes that the office meeting has deeper evolutionary roots than anyone in the office meeting wants to admit. Reassuring because at least the chimpanzee is direct. He screams, bares his teeth, shakes a branch, and everyone understands the agenda. Humans made the matter more confusing. We replaced the branch with phrases like, just circling back, executive alignment, and let's take this offline. Progress has its tragedies. Hierarchy is old. Older than theology, older than philosophy, older than states, older than the little voice inside us that says, surely this person cannot be in charge. Rank begins in animal life as pressure, nearness, threat, submission, alliance, advantage. Long before anyone could explain why they deserved authority, authority already existed as a bodily fact. Then human beings made the situation more interesting, which is what human beings tend to do whenever nature gives us something terrible. Early human groups had rank, skill, age, charisma, danger, memory, competence. Some people hunted better, some spoke better, some saw farther, some frightened others, some healed, some knew where water was. Yet early human groups also developed ways to resist domination. Ridicule, gossip, coalition, exile, shaming, refusal. The group could turn against the would-be tyrant. The dangerous man had to be watched. The boastful man had to be laughed at. The overreaching man had to learn that the group had teeth too. This may be one of the beginnings of morality. The moment power had to answer to something beyond itself. A chimp can dominate. A human must justify. And justification changes everything. Once power has to explain itself, it can be judged. Once the strong man has to say why his strength gives him the right to rule, a higher question has entered the room. At first, that higher question may take the form of custom, ancestor, spirit, taboo, story, myth, ritual. Later, it becomes law, truth, God. I am speaking here of God both as faith and as moral architecture, the point above human rank before which no earthly hierarchy is final. That distinction matters. Some readers hear the word God as truth. Some hear it as trauma. Some hear it as poetry. Some hear it as metaphysics. Some hear it as the name of the highest court. My concern here is the moral function of the idea. God as the point above the human swarm, the height from which every title shrinks. The king stands under God. The father stands under God. The priest stands under God. The boss stands under God. The nation stands under God. The audience stands under God. The algorithm, despite its impressive confidence, also stands under God. If all human beings stand under God, then no human being gets to be ultimate. That is the strange genius of the idea. The highest hierarchy humbles every lower hierarchy. The king and the beggar have different power, different clothing, different chances, different exposure to dental care. Yet, from the divine height, both are creatures. The master and the servant occupy different social positions, yet both are seen. The poor are more than failed competitors in a status game. The weak are more than evolutionary leftovers. The unseen are still seen. This is why the prophetic imagination has always been dangerous. It looks at the ruler and says, "Your throne has a ceiling." It looks at the crowd and says, "Your consensus has limits." It looks at the successful and says, "Your elevation proves less than you think." It looks at the humiliated and says, "Your low place in the human order is far from your final name." Of course, religion also became entangled with power. We know the record. Kings received divine blessing. Priests guarded access. Empires dressed conquest in sacred language. Women were disciplined. Servants were instructed to obey. Colonizers arrived with scripture in one hand and extraction in the other, often with impressive confidence in both hands. Every sacred idea can be captured by the human ape. That should humble believers and unbelievers alike. God can judge hierarchy. God can also be invoked by hierarchy. The same word can liberate the crushed and decorate the throne. This is why spiritual language requires vigilance. The moment God becomes too convenient to power, one should check the room for incense, uniforms, and men with very serious hats. Still, something powerful remains in the idea, a reference point above the social game. Without such a point, hierarchy closes in on itself. Rank begins to feel like reality. Recognition begins to feel like truth. Visibility begins to feel like worth. People with status appear more substantial. People without status begin to feel erased. This is one of the great pains of modern life. We have many ladders and a damaged ceiling. Corporate rank, cultural prestige, algorithmic attention, money, credentials, networks, audience size, institutional affiliation, these still organize our days. We still speak of dignity, justice, equality, authenticity, truth. Yet these words often circulate inside the very status contests they were supposed to judge. Every faction has moral language now. Every institution has values. Every brand has a conscience. Every platform has a community standard. Every executive bio mentions empathy. The age is full of kindness, vocabulary, and astonishing levels of ambient fear. Power has learned a softer voice. It can say alignment. It can say tone. It can say culture. It can say impact. It can say collaboration. It can also say nothing at all. Silence is one of modern hierarchy's finest instruments. A person can be corrected without being confronted. They can be ignored at exactly the moment recognition would have mattered. They can be left unsupported, while everyone waits to see whether someone more established will endorse them first. In older hierarchies, someone might have shouted, "Know your place." In ours, people simply fail to share the link. This is where Foucault remains useful. Power lives in norms, institutions, categories, silences, habits of attention, professional vocabularies, disciplines, and forms of knowledge. It does more than prohibit. It produces. It creates the kinds of people who can be understood, rewarded, corrected, diagnosed, promoted, excluded, or ignored. Power becomes atmospheric. It gets into the lighting. People reproduce hierarchy through tiny acts of caution. They learn when to speak, whom to quote, whom to praise, whom to ignore, when to soften, when to laugh, when to become suddenly very busy. The system does not need constant orders if people learn to order themselves. Then there is Machiavelli, who ruins everyone's evening by explaining the weather. He tells us that appearances matter, that rulers survive through perception, that virtue and effectiveness have an uneasy relationship, that people act from fear, ambition, loyalty, insecurity, appetite, memory, that the world rarely rewards goodness in its purest form. That truth does not automatically protect the truth-teller. I confess something. I find this spiritually offensive. There is a part of me that wants to place Machiavelli in a small bureaucratic hell, where he has to sit through endless meetings led by people who have read only summaries of his work. He would deserve at least a few quarters of that. Yet the irritating man saw something. He described the mechanics of power without offering the usual moral perfume. His danger lies in how easily realism becomes worship. One begins by noticing that appearance matters. Soon, appearance becomes the altar. One begins by acknowledging fear. Soon, fear becomes governance. One begins by understanding manipulation. Soon, manipulation becomes intelligence. Machiavelli the analyst is useful. Machiavellianism as a moral style is poison. This is why Socrates still matters. Socrates stands there, impossible and annoying and luminous, asking questions that make everyone's status unstable. He refuses to flatter the city. He treats truth as a way of living. He reminds us that the soul can be damaged by its own cowardice. He forces the city to reveal that it prefers peace without examination to truth with embarrassment. The city kills him, which is a fairly poor mark on the city. So we inherit three witnesses. Socrates gives us the demand of truth. Machiavelli gives us the mechanics of power. Foucault gives us the atmosphere through which power moves. A decent adult life probably requires hearing all three without letting any one of them become a tyrant inside the mind. This is difficult because each one offers a temptation. Socrates tempts us toward purity that forgets survival. Machiavelli tempts us toward effectiveness that forgets the soul. Foucault tempts us toward suspicion that forgets love. Every one of these temptations has visited me. Some have stayed for coffee. The daily world presents a more ordinary problem. People adapt to rank. They read rooms. They sense approval. They adjust their tone. They wait for signals. They follow prestige. They withhold support until support feels safe. Sometimes they call this professionalism. Sometimes prudence. Sometimes maturity. Sometimes realism. Sometimes it is cowardice. Sometimes it is survival. Usually it is both, mixed together in the strange soup of human behavior. This is where contempt becomes tempting. One sees the bending and wants to name everyone a coward, climber, courtier, fraud. The language of contempt arrives with a rush of relief because it protects the self from grief. It says, I am clean because they are dirty. I am awake because they are asleep. I am above the hierarchy because I see the hierarchy. That last sentence should frighten us. Contempt builds its own hierarchy. It places the observer above the observed. It creates a private throne out of disgust. And disgust, though useful as a moral alarm, makes a terrible king. Most people are frightened animals with language. I say this with affection, since I am also one of them, except with more elaborate sentences and worse sleep hygiene. People want belonging. They fear exile. They fear humiliation. They fear losing work, affection, protection, status, community. Their nervous systems are older than their principles. Their principles may be sincere, yet the room still affects them. A person who bends around hierarchy may be corrupt. They may also be tired, indebted, responsible for children, afraid of medical bills, afraid of being alone, trained by punishment, hungry for approval, or simply unequipped for the loneliness of direct speech. We can judge behavior while keeping the soul from becoming cruel. The practical question then becomes, how does one live truthfully in a world where hierarchy exists, power adapts, people bend, and God's leveling gaze is no longer shared by everyone in the room? I think the answer begins with refusing two cheap forms of innocence. The first cheap innocence says, I will ignore power and simply speak truth. The second says, I will master power and call the result wisdom. Both forms fail. One gets crushed too easily, the other wins too emptily. A better discipline is available. Keep truth above strategy. Put strategy in service of truth. Learn timing, audience, framing, silence, pacing, and translation. Use them as tools with fear and trembling, because tools change the hand that uses them. There is nothing holy about blurting out every true sentence at the most self-destructive moment. There is also nothing wise about concealing every conviction until one has become a smooth little instrument of the room. A livable code might look like this. Say no false thing. Do not counterfeit agreement. Do not praise emptiness to gain protection. Do not confuse social acceptance with moral confirmation. Do not let hierarchy decide what is real. Avoid giving truth to hostile systems in the easiest possible form to dismiss. Choose the room when possible. Choose the hour when possible. Choose the words with care. Find allies before the storm when possible. Keep enough humility to revise yourself. Keep enough dignity to remain yourself. This is less glamorous than martyrdom and less lucrative than court politics. It is also more habitable. There is a sadness that comes from seeing hierarchy clearly. I think many readers know it, even if they use different words. The sadness of watching people defer to titles rather than thought. The sadness of seeing moral language become branding. The sadness of noticing who gets amplified, who gets ignored, who waits for permission, who changes their view after the powerful person speaks. The sadness of realizing that truth often needs sponsorship before it is recognized as truth. That sadness deserves respect. It means some part of the soul still objects. Yet sadness should never become the price of integrity. Joy is allowed. Friendship is allowed. Humor is allowed. A good meal is allowed. Sunlight on a floor is allowed. A sentence that finally lands is allowed. Prayer is allowed. Rest is allowed. Even professional success is allowed, provided one does not confuse it with salvation. We do not need to bless the world's falseness in order to live inside the world. We can build small territories of truth. A friendship where speech is clean, a workplace practice that reduces fear, a family conversation where rank loosens for a moment, a piece of writing that refuses fashionable distortion, a prayer said without performance, a decision made without needing applause. These small territories matter. They are how higher judgment enters ordinary life. The boss is lower than truth. The market is lower than truth. The audience is lower than truth. The nation is lower than truth. The algorithm is lower than truth. The self is lower than truth too, which is the part we tend to forget when we are busy condemning everyone else. That may be the most merciful part of God. He judges the hierarchy outside us and the little throne inside us. He lowers the powerful and also lowers the ego that enjoys being morally right. He sees the climber and the critic, the flatterer and the purist, the coward and the prophet, the ape and the angel stitched into the same creature. Every alpha is temporary. Every throne is rented. Every credential fades. Every institution becomes faintly comic with enough time. Every empire eventually becomes a chapter. Every platform becomes obsolete. Every room that once felt like the whole world becomes, later, just a room. This should comfort us. No human hierarchy gets the last word. There is rank. There is power. There is fear. There is adaptation. There is silence. There is ambition. There is cowardice. There is also courage, tenderness, conscience, humor, repentance, and the stubborn human ability to look up. The higher judgment remains available wherever truth is placed above advantage, wherever dignity is granted without permission from status, wherever the strong are judged by something beyond strength, wherever the unseen are remembered, wherever a person refuses to become false, even while learning how the world works. We are animals. We are also answerable. That is our burden and our hope. Elias Winter, author of Language Matters, a space for reflection on language, power, and decline. Thanks for reading Language Matters. Subscribe for free to receive new posts and support my work.